Okay, and then let's continue our discussion about exception. And if you recall last class, we discussed quite a lot is regarding exception. So exception, it provides some nice way for us to handle some kind of like a runtime error or other kind of error gracefully, is that, so that we want to give user like a kind of unknown, just the program just got terminated. Is it? So we want to give users some nice experience. So the exception can do that. And regarding exception, this is very important in Java. We have two categories of exception. One is called checked exception. The other is unchecked exception. For unchecked exception, if you recall, we have that architecture of exception. Is it? It's from thrownable. Is it? The interface there. We have exception error, that on the exception, then we have like different kinds of concrete class exception, like a runtime exception. Runtime exception, like some of the example is like cannot divide by 0, that and index out of bound, that those kind of exception. And those kind of exception called runtime exception. It's because the programmer sometimes may forgot to do some check, that and then directly go ahead and do some operations. So those, a lot of times, logic error, that logic error can cause runtime exception. And there is another kind of error, is a system error. Okay, so runtime exception error and all of their subclasses, they are called unchecked exception. Unchecked, is it? That means Java allows you, don't handle it. Okay, don't handle it. But of course, it can cause unfriendly user, so not user-friendly experience for your application, is it? But it's okay, it will pass compilation. So no compilation error will be reported, is it? So your program can run. Okay, there is another kind of exception called checked exception. If you recall, a lot of the IO exception. And in our case, we discuss quite a lot, like a file not found exception, is it? So those are called checked exception. So for checked exception, you must check and deal with the exception. So there are multiple ways you can do. You either put it as the try catch block, is it, to handle it. And you must also throw the exception. Because when you throw the exception, the try catch block will take care of it. Is it? So those you must handle it for checked exception. Otherwise, it will cause, if no handling, it will cause compilation error. Okay, so you will have error. So that's regarding the difference between checked and unchecked exception, etc. And we also, if you recall, that we also saw this diagram regarding the hierarchy, that about the exception. So we, generally speaking, have two categories, error and exception. And under exception, then you have different kind, like IO exception, class not found exception, and the runtime exception, is it? And for this runtime exception, then we can have arithmetic exception, null point exception, index out of bound, illegal, and many more, is it? And error, it also has some linkage error, virtual machine error, and some other errors, is it? So in this diagram, for unchecked, so this part is for unchecked exception. All of the others, they are checked exception. So this and this, they are checked exception. Okay, so you must handle that. That's why we see quite a lot of example with IO exception. Okay, so this is regarding exception, and we already see. Let's see. And then we also see the try-catch block, is it? And the catch, and they also needed to match. Okay, so this exception and this exception, they must match with each other. Okay, and also in the method header, you can have the throws exception, is it? And within the body, you can have throw new exception. Okay, so because this is what we call declare, that's called the throw exception. So two different concepts. Okay, and we already saw those examples, is it? Let's see, and rethrow. And I recall our previous example also shows. So within the catch block, you can also throw exception. Okay, then we call it rethrow exception. Okay. And finally, block. So no matter what, is it? It's going to be handled. So it's even exception happens, it can also go to finally. Otherwise, if everything is correct, it will just directly jump to exception. So that's a quick review. And for those trees, we don't need to worry. Okay. And also, it's after we learned the exception, don't always throw exception. Okay, so here is some recommendation for the exception. It says, if you handle the exception in the method where it occurs, then there is no need to throw it. Okay, so here is one of the programming practice. So not always throw exception. Okay, don't get your program like overpopulated with exception. And when we use exception, here is we use it to deal with unexpected error condition. Okay, and do not use it to deal with simple expected situation. Is it like over this case, then you get a null point, is it? And you need to make sure this variable is not a null reference, is it? Because you want to get its to string. So then let's don't always do this, okay? So instead of you using a try-catch block, so what to recommend is you just do, if it is null, you do that, is it? Otherwise, you just say, oh, it's null. So after we learn except, don't just get every condition, then put it to exception. No, there is no such need, okay? Some simple case that can be handled using regular if-else statement, just using regular if-else statement. So here is a programming practice, okay? And the next, we will also see our example. We can also define our own exception, okay? So we will see that example later. So that's mostly for the exception. So next, let's take a look at the example. My example. Hold on, okay. That's not. Oh. Hold on, okay. Okay, so what next one? Let's see. Last class, let's first try to continue with our last class example, okay? So the example is Java exception, our first example. We already discussed quite a number of scenarios that with unchecked, the two number division. But in the, after we learn this, in the future for the divide by 0, you can just use if else to do the check. You don't need to always use the try catch block, do the arithmetic exception report, okay? So we already discussed all of the scenarios calculated. And I remember we started to see the file handling one. Is it the file handling one? Yes, so let's take a look at this get fluid function, okay? Okay, so here we have this get fluid method. For this method, it involves file that, and later on we will learn in more detail about file. So anyway, we associate a file name with a file object. That's it. But if file doesn't exist, then in this case, we throw the exception. Because this method is a throw exception, and it is check the exception. So that's why this is necessary. This is needed. So for your method declaration, you need to do throws file exception. Okay, file not found exception. Otherwise, then we can do standard input, or not standard input. Then we can do the input from the file. Okay, we can use a scanner to do it. Then we can read line by line. And then we just read the first line. And read the first line, then we do the tokenization, okay? So you extract each individual word out using the space, is it? And then always remember to close the file after you access it, okay? Otherwise, if you leave some resource not you're not going to use anymore, but you don't close it, it can cause some problem, okay? So always remember to close the file, okay? And then we convert the string version of number to integer. So this is a get fluid function. So this method anyway to throws a checked exception. Okay, because it throws a checked exception, then let's see. In our main, is it? You can clearly see I over here try to invoke that method, but did you see over here? It has error. Is it? It says unreported exception. It must be caught or declared to be thrown. So you must handle it. Is it? So we need to get it in a just like the previous one, like this get number, is it? So you need to put it in a try-catch block. Okay, otherwise, our main method needed to throw that exception. Okay, there is also that case. Okay. So this clearly say the checked exception, if you don't handle it, your program compilation cannot be passed because you have clearly have error reported here, is it? Okay, so we can comment out this one. Then let's see the second version, get fluid 2, okay. For the get fluid 2, then for this method, if you take a look, we don't throw any exception, is it? Anyway, we have a scanner, is it? So this part is associated with opening file. Is it? After you're opening the file, you have a file object created, then you can let the scanner to do the input from the file, is it? And then you can retrieve line by line, is it? But previously we saw this may cause the file not to find the exception. So that's why over here you put it in the try-catch block, is it? So if there is the exception, then we just stop the program, is it? Otherwise, then we can do more, is it? Do more is over here, this is contents, is it? So if the file has contents, then you need to close the file, is it? If file doesn't have contents, then over here we throw. So within the finally block, you can also do try catch, okay? Then you throw another IO exception. This is also checked exception. But this checked exception handled by the catch block. So that's why this get fluid 2 method doesn't need to declare exception, okay? So it's already handled inside the method. So the method then don't need to throw, is it? Okay, so that's this get fluid 2, is it? And with this get fluid 2, then you can clearly see there is no error report, is it? And we can also run it to see. And you can see, because we only have fluids.txt file, we don't have this fluids9.txt file, so it report the file not found exception, is it? And of course, it cannot close the file. So the IO exception also be reported. So it's gave us a very nice experience, is that you know what the problem is. We don't get panicked, is it by, oh, the program crashed, is it? Okay, so that's this version. And then let's take a look. The next version, get fluid 3. Okay, for the get fluid 3, it's just introduce another new concept is with file handling. Okay, the file handling, the file handling, it extends it implements the auto closable. So it has some feature called auto closable. And because it has a feature of auto closable, we can use not to call the try can, we call it try with resource block. Okay, try with resource block. So let's see what does this mean. Okay, it still has a try and a catch, but after catch, we have this parenthesis. Okay, within the parenthesis, you can deal with the resource. So here is the resources come from. We call it try with resources. So you put resources as a parameter of the try. Okay, so the file not found exception, is it? It's not within the try block's body, it's within the parentheses. Is it kind of like the method? So if there is a problem with the resource, then this catch block will take care of it. Okay, and then in this case, we also don't need to worry about the closing because it's auto closable. Okay, so you don't, if you compare with the previous version, then you don't need to specifically write the close. You call the close method. There is no need anymore. You don't need to close because it's auto close. Okay, once you finish using it, it will automatically be taken care of by this try with resource block. Okay, so that's the nice thing for try with resources. If the resources can be auto closable, for the file handling, it can be. So that's why we can directly use this. Okay, and then let's see. So over here we call the try fluid version 3, etc. And we can run it. Is it? So it just see the file not found, is it? And we can also see if file does exist, will it automatically close the file? Oh, then in this case, it's because I have some number formatting error. Okay, so that is okay. Okay. So that's not the file closing error, but we can take a look at the next case, the get fluid version 5. Okay, so let's take a look at that case. The last version of our get fluid, is it? We still use try with resources. And it can take care of auto closable. Is it auto closable? And for file, it implements the auto closable. So it has a feature of auto closable. So that's why we can put it with a try with resource block. Okay. So the first part, okay, deal with file. Is it? Second part is the file won't be loaded, is it? And the third is number formatting issues, is it? So we take care, so over here we have multiple exceptions, is it? So it can take care of all of this, okay, of this. And then let's see, let's run it. And you can clearly see this time the file is correct, is it? So the file closing also be taken care of. It's just the number is not what the program can handle. So that's why it says, okay, it's not the file correct. Basically, the file not corrected, is it? So it's the number formatting issue. As a number of, so it has nothing to do with the file itself. Okay, so it can be handled pretty nicely. Okay, in this case, let's get back to our file. Is it so? The file class, it's regarding the number formatting exception. Is it so? The file is also closed after we run this program. Is it handled pretty neatly? Okay. Okay, so that's regarding regarding the exception. What's the next example we try to show is the let's see, is it the user defined? Yes. So the next one is, let's see, customized exception. Is it? So you can also define your own exception. So here I define an exception class. I call it my exception. But of course, exception needed to extend if you want to, like exception. Is it? Okay, and over here I pick that class not found exception. Okay, and this is a checked exception. So how do we define our own exception? Okay, you can extend from certain exception, is it? And here you have constructor, it's basically called the super call class not found exceptions constructor, is it? And also provide a toString. So a pretty simple one in this case. Okay, just try to show us. And then what you can do over here, we provide a method. This method is also pretty simple. Okay, pretty simple. It throws this exception. So that's a customized exception. So here you declare. Okay, and here you throw in the method. The method is throw, and here you throws. Okay, you must. If you handle it within the method, then you don't need to throw. If you have the try, catch, then you don't need to throw. Because over here, you don't have try, catch, you throw. Then over here, you must throw it, okay? Because this is checked exception, okay? And then in our main, then in main, you need to have try, catch block. If you call this method, otherwise it will report error, okay, compilation error. So we do have try catch block take care of this exception. Okay, so this example is a quite a simple example. And then what next part today we will learn is the file part. Another concept, okay. So exception, we kind of completed it, okay. Okay. So what is the next important part in this unit is regarding file, okay, file. So we start with the file class. So what is a file class? File class is that provide abstraction, deal with most machine dependable complexity of the file and the path. Okay, in a machine independent fashion. Okay, and the file name is a string, and the file class is just a wrapper class for file name and its paths. Okay, so that's a general idea about the file class. And here it also gives us a quite detailed information about the file class. So it has a number of constructors, is it? So it's involved with like a file name and path name, is it? And for file, you can also check some of its properties. Does the file exist? Can the file read, write? Is a file or a directory? Is a path absolute or relative? Is the file hidden? So all of those properties you can check the file. You can also find the absolute path name or relative path name, the file name, file path, is it? And when like it's last modified, the file lanes, is it? And some other methods that you can use related with the file. Okay, so this is the file class. Okay, the file class, then later on we will see an example. Okay, and we will also see. So regarding the file, normally what we are going to do with files, we are going to read and write data. Is it from and to a file? Is it read and write? Okay, from and to a file. Okay, so how are we going to do that? We have the file, it cannot automatically be read and write. Okay, so in Java, then you also need to use the appropriate Java input and output class. Okay, output class. And then to do read and write. Okay, for text one, okay, deal with string and numerical values. We already see quite a number of times the scanner, etc. So using scanner, you can read from file also, not just the keyboard. And we can also do print writer, okay, to write something, some text or numerical values back to file, okay. So this is regarding text input and output. We can use a scanner and a print writer, okay. Okay, and then it shows us the print writer general idea, okay. So it has the print writer, is it? And the constructor, then it has a bunch of print. Is it? So the print, you can write a string character or an array of character or integer, floating, double, Boolean, you can write all of that, okay. And with the print method, it says it also contains overloaded print line method. So you can also print line, okay. And it also contains formatted output, okay, formatted. So this print line and the printf method also available for a print writer, and we will take a look at an example. Try with resource we already discussed. And for scanner, is it? And the scanner previously we saw as we invoke from standard input from keyboard, is it? And you can also associate with file, do file input and output, because I/O input output is not just for keyboard and our monitor, is it? So we have standard I/O. So that's regarding like a keyboard and the monitor. And we also have file input output, is it? Another way is you can also from network, like internet, is it input, output. So there are multiple ways, is it to do input and output, okay? And for the file, is it file, then it also involves the hardware, is it? So the storage, is it? So that's why you need a file to handle that. And then you take care of the input, is it? Using scanner, okay? And for the scanner, it has a method has net always check if some more token, is it in the input, okay? And the next regular next just get a string. The next byte gets a byte. A byte is 8 bits. Okay, it's like a character. A character is 8 bits. Okay, you can also do short integer, or integer, or long integer, or floating, is it, or double, is it? And you can also use a specific delimiter. You can specify. As if you don't specify it, we'll go ahead just use a space, okay, as a delimiter. So this is a scanner. Okay, then the other one we will see in our example. And next, let's take a look at our example. So this example, let's see. It has the file handling, okay. So let's take a look. So over here, basically, if you take a look, this is an image file. So over here, we use an image file to see, is that how we handle file. So we still associate the file with the file class. So it belongs to java.io, okay, data file class. And this file is under this image folder. And this image folder is within our project, okay? So we didn't provide the absolute, so this is a relative path. Field path, that's it. Okay, so if the file doesn't exist, then we throw file not. So as usual, we have the try catch block to deal with checked exception. So this part is understandable, is it? And what next is, okay, once you have the file, then you can check. You can call if it is exist, is it? And how big the file is. Is the file be able to read or write? Is it a directory? Is a file? What's the absolute path? Is it a hidden file? What's its absolute path? And what is last modified date of this information? Okay, you can check. Okay, so that's regarding this part. And what is the next part? To try to show how we read from file. Basically, in our previous exception example, we also kind of see that, is it? And here we have a plain text file. Okay, called contact.txt, is it? Then we call the read from file. And because it's involved file handling, so we also put it in the try catch block, okay? So let's take a look at read from file. So read from file, then the parameter is a file, okay, object. And of course, if file doesn't exist, then we deal with that file not found exception, is it? If we find it, then we can start to read. Before you start to read, you need to associate file object with scanner. Okay, with the scanner. And with the scanner, then you can call the has next line because it's plain text file. So we want to do line by line reading, is it? And then you can check if it has next line. If it is, then you get the next line, is it? And then you output the line. After we use it, we can close it. Okay, we can close. And let's take a look at this part of the running result, okay? And if we take a look, the running result, is it, you see it did provide all of the properties. So this is how many bytes the file is it? Can be read, can be write. It's not a directory, it's a file, is it? It's not an absolute path. It's not a hidden. So over here, it gave us the detailed path, absolute path, and also give us when the last updated date, is it? And regarding the context plain text file, it's something like this. So we have some like a name, city name, and email address, and some number, is it? It's a plain text file, is it? So it does show we can read using scanner to read, is it? Okay, read from file, okay, here. Because once you get this information, then you can handle it, okay? So next, we will also see how are we going to handle the file. Okay, so that's read from file. And what the next part try to show is the second read from file 2, okay? So it's the same. You associate a file object with scanner. So this time we don't do line by line. We just do has next because we already saw the file. Is it saw the file? So it's so if you just do the next, it take the string. Does it take string? So it will take a string, okay? And over here, you take the next integer. Is it? Then we directly output it. And after we use it, we close the file, okay? And then let's see if in this part, okay, over here, we call that read from file 2, is it? So let's see what the output is. If you take a look, the output, hold on, let me see. Go back. Oh, the first one we just read from file, is it? And we didn't output the file. Did we output read? Oh, we did output the line. For the second, we read the file, is it? And we write like this. Okay, we write like this. So this is going to be the output, okay? Output. So the output, did you see? That's the output. So this time we don't have comma, is it? Because we have space to separate that. Okay, so we did retrieve all of the information, is it? Okay, so that's regarding read. And what next is try to show you can write to file. Okay, so similar, when you associate the file, if file exists, is it? And you can do the try catch block, is it? And over here, whenever we do write, here we associate the file with print file, okay, with print file. Then we can write to file. So what are we going to write? First, we write this information, the email address back to file. Then we print So this is, you just print. Is it after that you print a number, and then this is a line. Is it? So then we print the second line. So this file just has 2 lines. Is it? So the information you provide, name, city, email, and the number. Is it? After we use it, we close the file. Okay. So that's how we do the write to file. And the write to file, then over here, we create a different file. It's called contact out text, a plain text file. Is it? Then you just call that method write to file, and then plug in this file objects. Then you can open this file to verify that the information did get output to this file. Okay. Okay, so this is the starting point of our file handling. Okay, so next week we will discuss